Welcome to the Sony Labs Showcase event, which celebrates the launch of Digital Catapult and Ofcom's new cutting-edge interoperability testing lab. Today, we will also explore the progress of the Sony Labs program with a particular focus on the interoperability testing that has been taking place in our facilities. This is a key milestone in the path towards 5G supply chain diversification in the UK, and we are grateful to the Department for Science, Innovation and Telecom for the continued support and for making this event possible today. I'm Linda Riggio, Senior Innovation Partner and Team Lead at Digital Catapult, and I'm delighted to welcome you all who have joined us today at Digital Catapult's London office and those of you who are watching online. Let's have a look at the agenda for today. We will soon hear from our CEO at Digital Catapult for some welcoming notes before we hear also from DC for an introduction. We will then offer you an overview of the Sony Labs program before a panel where we will hear from some of the vendors that are doing some of the amazing work in our Sony Labs facility. At midday, there will be a little break and also tours of the lab for those who are here today. And we'll all reconvene at 1:30 for the second part of the event, which will start with a panel, bringing you insights from some of the international Open RAN labs and testbeds. We will then conclude with a look at the next step for Sony Labs and opportunities to collaborate with us. During the event, there will be plenty of networking opportunities, and for those who are online, you will also be able to contribute to the Q&A session at the end of each panel. Now, it's time to start this event. I hope you'll enjoy it, and I would like to introduce, welcome to the stage, our Chief Executive Officer, Jeremy Silver, for some introductory notes. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, and good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to Digital Catapult. I know many of you are familiar with us and have been here before, but it's great to see so many in the room to focus on this particular topic, which is so interesting and so critically important to the future of the telecoms industry, not just in the UK, but around the world. We live, as you all know, in a time of extraordinary geopolitical complexity, and the changes that we see around us are impacting every aspect of our lives and of the way in which we think about technology. But at the same time, technology is developing and changing and accelerating at shockingly fast rates. And every week there seems to be another surprise, another lurch forward in capability, and with all the ramifications of those accelerations still for us to work through and to try and think about. And in the case of the telecom sector, that's no exception. The ability, the softwareization of networks, the capabilities that we're just beginning to explore in terms of where 5G, 6G and Open RAN are capable of going, are topics which are exercising brilliant minds around the world. And our goal has been to try and focus some of those brilliant brains here through the convening power of the Catapult to bring people together in a way that takes advantage of our commercially agnostic, technology agnostic role in the middle of the marketplace with the help of DCIT, our sponsors and our partners, Ofcom, to really try and focus in on a really interesting set of opportunities that arise out of softwareization and particularly out of Open RAN. And what we see very often in these kinds of environments is that the dilemma that companies find themselves in between, on the one hand, wanting to compete and to acquire competitive advantage over one another as aggressively as possible, and on the other hand, in this space particularly, the opportunity to grow and go forward and to make changes to the nature of the sector by collaborating and by working together. And that balance, that tension between those two commercial imperatives is the one that we hope we strike effectively in the Sonic Labs. We feel that we are a place where people can bring a collaborative spirit to bear and take their technological insights together whilst preserving what may be special to them, but finding those points of interaction. And obviously, as we look at the diversification of the supply chain and the ability to introduce new components and new elements, and therefore new entrants into the market, it's great to see the UK being a place where we're really at the leading edge of that kind of innovation, and where companies feel that they want to come and put their investment here in the UK to take advantage of what's being offered. And whilst we are very focused, and in some respects, some of you might say, well, this is a very nerdy, engineeringly focused little bit of work that's going on here. It is, if you like, the fulcrum of the lever, and the implications of what goes on and the implications of the output of this work are really significant for the sector. So we're super excited to have made the progress that we have made. We're excited to be able to show you the lab in its finished state today, but as you know, the work has already been going on for over a year of working with many of you in the room here and other companies to take part in programs that bring people together and bring you together to address those kinds of technology challenges. And so it's great to be welcoming so many of you who've already contributed to the program, and I hope have already gained immensely from it, and we're going to hear later on from you, so we'll hear a bit more about how that actually works, to welcome you here today. So absolute pleasure. I think it's going to be a fascinating day. Those of you who are online, you're going to miss out on visiting the lab, but come and see us in person at some point in your own time, and we'll be happy to welcome you. So that's really enough from me. I think the challenge for all of us is to maintain what has been created here, which is, I think, a genuinely global leadership position in which we are helping businesses to go further, faster than they would otherwise be able to do, and in a way that really isn't available in any other facility of its kind around the world. It's a great pleasure, therefore, to introduce our sponsor and our sponsoring government department, and the spokesman, the Director for Digital Infrastructure, DCIT, Imran Shafi, who's going to say a few words now. Thank you very much. Imran.
Thank you, Jeremy. It is brilliant to be here. My favourite fact about this street is, and sorry for those who are online who can't see this, that hotel over there behind us is where the Spice Girls did the Wannabe video. So the sort of the very sort of, you know, when they're walking down the staircase. So for those of you who haven't been here before, after the event, go and walk down that staircase and take a video of yourself. But that was also sort of like an example of sort of the UK sort of popping up out of nowhere to sort of like create a whole new industry of terrible music, but something that created jobs and opportunity in the UK, and it's something that we wanted to do in telecoms as well. I'll refrain from making any further Spice Girls jokes. But thank you to Digital Catapult for hosting us here today. It's really fantastic to sort of see how much progress we've made on Sonic, and I'll come back to that in a bit. Just to introduce myself, so I'm Imran. I'm the Director for Digital Infrastructure at the new Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. And you might have seen a few weeks ago that the Prime Minister established this department because he wants the UK to be a science superpower by 2030. And so that's going to require a huge amount of effort across all planks of how we make science and technology work in the UK. But it's about bringing together the key technologies in the UK to sort of like make the sum greater than the parts. And one of the key things that he and our Secretary of State, Michelle Donnellan, have announced is 5 priority technology areas for the UK, which are quantum, AI, engineering, biology, semiconductors, and future telecoms. And I think if you'd asked people 5-6 years ago, would telecoms be in that list, they probably would have said no. And so it's a real testament to the passion and the energy of everybody in this room and sort of the wider sector that the government is really backing telecoms as an area of future growth for the UK, and it's just a reflection of just how important this sector is to us. I guess we are known as the checkbook for all of these programs as the department, but it's ultimately taxpayer money, and so all of your funding, unless you've got particularly creative accountants. Our responsibility is to really make sure that what we're spending money on is genuinely value adding, is something that the private sector couldn't do alone. And the Sonic Labs is a really brilliant example of this, and it was one of the very first projects that we announced about 2 years ago as part of our agenda to diversify the supply chain. And if you take that from an idea 2 years ago to, I've just had a quick tour of a sneak preview tour of the lab today, and seeing how far that's gone already in 2 years is really exciting, and to imagine where that's going to go in the next 2 years is great to see. And so this is just a perfect example of the public sector and the private sector coming together to deliver something that together we wouldn't be able to do. Obviously, this is part of our overall strategy to diversify the supply chain in telecoms, and we have lots more funding opportunities available for all sorts of projects. We're building a UK telecoms lab, and the key for us will be making sure that all of these different parts of the ecosystem speak to each other, and the sum is greater than parts. At Mobile World Congress a few weeks ago, it was brilliant to see all the energy around open and interoperable networks, which is something that in the UK we really want to push. Lots of challenges ahead in sort of making it a reality, but there's a real sort of drive and commitment on that. And it was also brilliant to see so much of a shared objective with our international partners, and it's brilliant to see a few of them in the room today. Ultimately, we can't do this as the UK alone. Most countries can't do it alone, and so we have to work together. And I was really struck when I was in DC a few months ago talking to my counterparts in the NTIA, which is their equivalent department, and they were raving about Sonic Labs. They were saying it's brilliant and we want to learn as much as we possibly can from Sonic Labs. So it's really, really brilliant to see, even sort of like thousands and thousands of miles away, people are talking about the work that's being done in this building and the lessons that we can learn together. And so we should continue to collaborate, and we should continue to work with international partners on this. What's next for us? We will shortly be publishing our new sort of strategy on overall how we see the development of wireless infrastructure in the UK. That's going to have our views and vision on what 6G should look like and what role the UK can play on 6G, as well as how we can boost the adoption of 5G across the country. We're still going to press ahead on all of our diversification agenda, and we're continuing with the gigabit rollout to push on that whole agenda. So lots more to do. Let's carry on collaborating. Let's carry on working together, and really excited to see where this goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy and Imran. We're now going to hear a bit more about Sony Labs from Joe Butler, who is Chief Technology Officer at Digital Catapult, and also for Gary Cremo, who is the Director of Emerging Technology at Ofcom. First, I'd like to invite to the stage Joe. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda, and welcome everyone to Digital Catapult and to the opening of our labs. In terms of what we're trying to do here with Sonic Labs, we actually have, contrary to the opening remarks, we haven't got any strange metaphorical telecoms version of Spice Girls music. We've got some quite specific objectives of what we're trying to do. So we support organisations that come through our labs to integrate their Open RAN products into working end-to-end systems, conducting interoperability tests and performance tests in a neutral environment. So, as well as that, supporting organisations on their route to commercialisation. So, we are leveraging our expertise here at the Catapult in terms of accelerating routes to market, alongside our experience in facilitating innovation activities, and also our partnership with Ofcom, which is providing invaluable, both in terms of technical interchange and also market understanding, and maintaining a picture really of the barriers and the challenges that are faced. So Sonic Labs occupies this position here really, pre-commercial, pre-end operator testing at scale, but that really integral part where innovative products are coming into the marketplace and face quite a difficult route to actually adoption and uptake within national networks. So ultimately, we are looking to support more vendors with more products suitable for the UK market and more working end-to-end systems that can interoperate amongst each other, with the end goal that more of those products are put to use in networks, achieving diversification, and our hope is more innovation in the market. So, in terms of progress to date, today we're opening up the labs, but we've been busy working, as Jeremy and Imran have said, for the last year or so already. So far we've had 15 vendors and 36 Open RAN products which have collaborated with us on Sonic Labs. So this program signifies, I think, the largest concentration of Open RAN vendors coming together to collaborate in a commercially neutral environment in the UK. And we've got reach to go even further with our new facilities that you'll hear about today. And we're very pleased today to announce for the first time the new set of vendors that we're working with as part of our latest cohort in the labs. And I see this as a real measure of success, that we've got a fantastic mixture of companies, both those that have been with us already and have been through the labs and are coming back to do more with us, as well as new entrants from overseas as well. So it's really nice to see everybody in the room, seeing many of the people who are part of the Sonic Labs partnership in the room today, and I hope today will be a really useful day for everyone to talk and collaborate. Before I hand over to Gary from Ofcom, in terms of what's next, our longer term ambition for Sonic Labs has always been the uptake of wider open networking technology in all of its forms in the UK into the telecoms ecosystem and supporting innovators and innovation in the UK market. So we're going to be extending our work on the RIC and on network optimization, doing things like bringing AI and machine learning expertise that is strong in the UK into the telecoms ecosystem. And then alongside our laboratories that you'll be seeing today, we're also building out a full indoor Open RAN network here in Digital Catapult's offices, which we'll hear more about. And we're also building an outdoor network to enable real-world performance and field trials alongside our laboratory capabilities. So that provides really quite a powerful setup in terms of the sorts of things that you can do in testing interoperability at an early stage, but also making that shift to later stage kind of integration and uptake, and making that journey in the UK easier. So thank you very much to DCIT and prior to that DCMS for enabling us to do this work with funding. We're also very grateful to Ofcom for the partnership, which is proving incredibly fruitful. I'll hand over now to Gary, who's the Director of Emerging Tech from Ofcom, to give you more of their perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. It is, as others have said, fantastic to be here, not just because it gives me an opportunity to talk about how important this work is to Ofcom, and just to say how valuable the collaboration is with Digital Catapult. But also it's great to see so many people from different organisations who share this common interest and passion for delivering what is, as has been said already, a really critical piece of work. So, as Joe says, I'm from Ofcom. I'm Gary Clemo. I'm responsible. I'm one of the directors in our technology data innovation group that's responsible for a portfolio of work which looks ahead, tries to anticipate what the future technology challenges will be, especially with a view to helping out our colleagues working on policy in relation to telecoms and media sectors. I know the wider team are really proud to be involved in Sonic Labs. It's not just the work. The quality of the collaboration is really important to us too. It's genuine and deep-seated, and we are really excited as we move into this next phase of work. In Ofcom, we undertake a wide range of technology work, but it's important to me and the wider team that it has some purpose. It's not just something that's interesting. In this case, over the past few years, Sonic has provided us and our policy teams with really quite unique and practical insight into the ongoing challenges and the insight into the policy work that's undertaken by our colleagues, in particular in relation to network vendor diversification, but also gives us a particular focus for some of our work on monitoring standardization. But the really striking thing, as important as all of that thing is how it's changing us as an organization and how it continues to change us as an organization. We've been conducting technology work in Ofcom for as long as Ofcom has been in existence, which is 20 years this year. And up to about 10 years ago, most, if not all of that work was conducted by engaging with external consultants. And we still do that. There's certainly a need or a role for that. But from about 10 years ago to roughly a few years ago, we realized that actually we've got a collection of really skilled, really knowledgeable experts within the organization who can do all of that work, but also perhaps provide some very good insight into the way in which Ofcom operates and our regulatory remit. So we took the step of developing our in-house capability. But even then, the work was often quite theoretical. Lots of modeling, lots of coexistence studies, lots of desk research, and an awful lot of documents produced. But this, I do believe that Sonic has changed that. And it's shown us the way that by demonstrating how getting our hands dirty involved in doing some practical hands-on work, understanding what the challenges actually are, almost living, going through the processes that some of our stakeholders and the wider community are experiencing. It gives us a particular insight that makes our policy work a bit more real. Sonic certainly has shown us the way. It's also helped us to develop a really compelling career story for people. I mean, it's why would you come and work for Ofcom if you are an engineer, for example? Well, it's very clear now because you can get involved in really meaningful policy work whilst also getting involved in some technical work which develops skills that are important and vital in the outside world as well. You can be an engineer and yet also work at Ofcom. And as technology evolves, and as the kind of technologies that we in Ofcom are really interested in changes, this is going to be a model that we're going to replicate. I'm thinking here about the work we're already starting on, understanding how, in particular in the broadcast and telco sectors, how those partners are using cloud services or using machine learning to develop their services or manage their networks. You can't really understand that just by reading a paper. You actually have to get involved and use some of the technologies yourself. So Sonic Labs has proven to be a fantastic example about how this works in practice. And it's a template that we are replicating even now as we develop a more hands-on, practical machine vision lab in Manchester to support our incoming online safety duties. So, in conclusion, fantastic work today. Really excited to see what comes next, and looking forward on your behalf to see the lab later. It's in really fantastic shape, and looking forward to the next phase. Thank you all.
Thank you, Joe and Gary. And now we have the pleasure to hear from some of the Open RAN vendors that are taking part in the Sonic Labs program. Chairing our first panel is Paul Seeley, Director of Technology Strategy at Digital Catapult, and I'm going to invite him to the stage to welcome our guest speakers.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you for inviting me to share this. I'm really looking forward to this panel session where we have 4 of the participants in our program, and I'd like to ask them to come up. So Stephen, Arno, Lokan, and Rafa, if you could come up and take place. And we've got 40 minutes here of a panel session, and followed by 10 minutes of questions. And this is my connection. So please put your questions in if you're online as well. My first question, as you might expect, is a kind of a starter question. So can you introduce yourself, your company, and also what's your involvement in Sonic Labs? What have you been doing with us? And so I will start off with Lokan, if you can.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, Lokan Burke, work for VMware. So long history of doing telco stuff, mostly in the UK. I've gone back to Orbital all the way through. So the work we've been doing with Digital Catapult is mostly related to the the RIC parts with Sonic Labs, as well as some of the telco cloud platform parts.
And Stephen?
Hi, I'm Stephen Patrick, CEO of Cable Free Wireless Excellence. We're a 4G, 5G radio vendor based on the Oxford Science Park, and we sell radios globally. Our involvement in Sonic Labs is, of course, as a radio vendor, connecting with our colleagues, the CU and DU vendors, to provide end-to-end connectivity.
Arno?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Arnaud Bolster. I'm heading sales and project management for Acceleran. For those of you who don't know Acceleran, we are an Open RAN software and solution provider. We are headquartered in Antwerp, Belgium. And we are about 50 people strong, so we are basically an SME and an Open RAN challenger from that perspective. So you can see us in two capacities. We are providing components in the ORAN ecosystem, namely the CU and the RIC, for those of you who like acronyms. And we are also providing end-to-end Open RAN 5G SA solution, acting as a RAN system integrator. And we've been active in Sonic Labs for quite some time, since its inception, actually. Already in Sonic 1, as you can see on the slides before. And so really happy about the journey and looking forward to keep going with it.
Good morning, everybody. Rafał Sanecki, Head of Marketing for IS Wireless. We develop and deliver 5G mobile networks in the Open RAN model. In Sonic Labs Cohort 1, we delivered CU-DU. As you saw a moment ago, we are also present in Sonic Labs Cohort 3, where additionally we deliver near real-time RIC along with XApps.
Great, thank you. And first question is, one of the things that we're doing in Sonic Labs is bringing together vendors with products some of whom haven't worked together before. And that's part of trying to sort of build the ecosystem. I wonder how has this process been for you in terms of coming in, starting to integrate and test with some new products that you haven't necessarily come across before. So if I can ask Raphael, if you go first.
Sure. It has been, it continues to be a remarkable journey for us. It's all about working together to meet customers' expectations, not to mention new partnerships we've built and opportunities to learn from one another. Of course, there were some technical challenges. Just to mention a few, one of them was, for example, maintaining the same level of stability in end-to-end chain when swapping RUs. Another one could be, for example, achieving expected level of throughput while testing various UEs, or in general, finding the best UE to work in N77 band. But we've overcome those challenges by working together because this is exactly what our customers are expecting from us, to deliver full working solution.
Yep. Who would like to go next? Arna?
I think I just want to obviously second what Raphael just mentioned. I think it's been for us a very interesting journey. Also from a collaboration standpoint, I think getting access to other vendors in the ecosystem and making Open RAN a reality. Acceleran had already invested a lot in pre-integrating certain third-party components, and some of them are with me on the stage today. But I think it's already taking a next step to do that in the lab with in Sonic Labs, and to really go to the proof of what it means to integrate and looking at the real challenges that we can face. Some simple ones like, okay, skill levels of people in terms of knowing the new technology, Kubernetes, for those of you who like to, again, the terminology of technology. But again, I think the fact that Sonic Lab exists and that there is also funding for enterprise to come and invest resources into integration is very important to make Open RAN a reality, and especially to bring Open RAN challengers to the table.
Steve?
Yeah, as Cable Free, we're delighted to take part with the Sonic Labs program. It brings together the best of breed in Open RAN, genuinely pushing forward the boundaries for Open RAN technology, bringing vendors together. Some of us have worked together in the commercial domain already, but some of us haven't. So that, again, increases the opportunities for interoperability and end-to-end testing.
And yeah, I think the net result of a lot of that is really accelerating the availability of these combinations out in the market. So I think a lot of us have worked together here and then have met together with real customers And I think the learnings have maybe saved us 50, 60% of our time in those occasions. It's a huge savings in time and effort. Yeah, really powerful knowledge sharing.
Okay, that's good to know. And that was kind of the next thing I was going to talk about is having brought your product here and got them working with others. What is the next step, do you think, for what you're doing? Is it to carry on integrating with yet more other products and other vendors? Is that a route you think, or is it to, I don't know, get as you're saying, get in front of customers, or is it certifications? We're not doing certifications here. Is it certification kind of things? Where would you see you'd like to go next? So I don't know. I wonder if you can pick up that one.
I think that's a very good question. As I said, Acceleron has been here since the beginning of Sonic Labs, right? So I think for us, it's certainly not a one-shot exercise. I think we really see that as a journey in terms of evolving from something which is at a lower TRL level to something which can really be commercialized and productized. So I think from our perspective, we of course already have references of our end-to-end solutions deployed on the market. But what's important is, first of all, to get access to more Open RAN partners with whom we can integrate and really show the reality of Open RAN, but also to, in that journey, to move really from the labs to more field trials and deployment, so that we can build the credibility and really make that supply chain diversification a reality, so that Sonic Labs can really be an instrument to bring new vendors to the market and to help us move to commercial deployments and field tests with operators.
And Stephen, have you got a few thoughts?
Absolutely. So indeed, it's a journey from individual system components into systems that can work in the lab, then be taken out to the field and into the wider industry. So Sonic Labs has a great role to play there for all of us.
And Loka?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of areas I'd love to see explored. We talked a little bit about certification, so there's lots of confusion as to what that really means. I think in the markets, right, who does what and what does it really mean when I go to buy something that works? And I think the other bit we need to work on is a bit more on we're talking about building a system, right? So the system requirements are quite important. Where do we really want to deploy these types of technologies? Is it a dense underlay in the macro, or do we want to do enterprise indoor? How do we really figure system requirements, the volumes of equipment needed for that, and then drive the system solution cost or system release validation? It's incredibly expensive to test this stuff, as you know, right? So how do you test and do performance work for that? And how do we get it in a meaningful way into our customers?
Okay. And Rafa?
I can only second what you've said. The journey is a good metaphor, I believe. It's like train, which is getting speed, moving faster and faster. I would add to it that we as IS Wireless would like to continue being part of the ecosystem the UK government is building. We see you, Digital Catapult, as not only leader in Europe, but we consider you a global frontrunner in terms of telco supply chain diversification. So we'd like to stay close, be part of it, bring our expertise to the table. One of the best telco teams we have in our part of Europe. Also experience from real life installations. This week we'll be announcing installation for Industry 4.0 in Poland, in Krakow, with one of major brands. So we'd like to also bring this, commercial expertise to the table and continue this journey with you.
Great, thank you. And thinking about, I was thinking about the kind of products that we're looking. Something that's come up a lot recently. We were talking about, I think it's mentioned before, AI as an area. Using AI and machine learning as technologies to make the network more intelligent and to bring automation to it. The RIC, apologies for all of these technology abbreviations. It's something that we in telecoms do. I think it's part of the expert syndrome, that by coming up with names that only we can understand, people think we know more, which is not actually the case. We just use names that no one else understands. So the RIC, RAN Intelligent Controllers, it's supposed to be the kind of brains behind it. It's something new that comes with Open RAN that we've not seen before. This is many of the things that Open RAN is doing is taking what the capabilities you would normally have in a network, and then bringing openness to get different vendors be able to break it into smaller chunks. Whereas the RIC is something that potentially has additional value to bring to it in terms of enabling better quality information from the network and be able to then optimize the experience that you get on a very granular level. And I'm just wondering, because I know Lokanana and Rafael, you have RIC products, and I wonder where you think, it's quite early stages, I understand, so it'd be interesting to get your perspective on where you think on that kind of like journey we're on. But where do you think are the most important areas to work on? So we're doing some interoperability, say, with the other elements, but also there's discussion of the applications, because the idea is that you create a platform that then applications can sit on that then allow you to allow third parties to then optimize the network, including the operators themselves that previously would have only been done by the mainstream vendors. So really opening up not just the equipment, but the whole system. Sorry, I keep on waving my piece of paper around. And so where do you think from a RIC perspective and from that interoperability, where do you think that we should the most interesting bit to work on now? I think Lorcan, I think you were going to start us on this one.
Yeah, I can start. I mean, we've got a couple of RIC partners, co-opetition. We've got a few other people around the table here. I mean, broadly, there's real-time things and slightly less real-time things. Of course, we've named them sounding the same: near real-time and non-real-time RIC. I think there's two parts to it. Like, one is at least upgrading what was the self-organizing network. So some of the basic automation we did in the last generation of RAN technologies, making them properly multi-vendor. So really opening interfaces in the new world of Open RAN, and then making sure the existing RAN vendors open up interfaces, and then creating an automation platform to really drive out cost in how we automate the infrastructure. And then there's the near real-time RIC, so more the real-time things which typically would be very closed into a base station. So the scheduler, the radio resource management. So really things that allow you to have a different quality of service for different applications right at the edge of the network. And we see a bunch of requirements from call them the hyperscalers, where they really want differentiated quality of service for video. Short-form video needs to be improved at the edge. And that's very hard for the existing mobile network to do, because the scheduler has been optimized for classic average use case. So I think there's things we're all working on together at various levels, which shows that it can actually be done. And then once we figure out how the near real-time things can get done, we can figure out how to scale them in the rest of the network. So that's pretty cool. I think that they are real things that actually need doing, right? So automation across the network, and then figuring out how we make quality of service better in the access network.
Great. And Arno, if you'd like.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, Paul, I think the RIC for us, for Accelerator, is certainly one of the key area of Open RAN. I think it's a key differentiator. And if you look a bit at the history, short-term history, but still, we launched back in 2019 the first RIC on the market. And that was the way for us to demonstrate the value of Open RAN in terms of exposing data and making available control hooks to app developers that could now control the RAN instead of having a closed system like with legacy vendors. So we did that in 2019. And very early, we were able to demonstrate the benefit with BT at the time of an interference management XApp developed on a RIC that was 4G at the time, but still showing the benefit of exposing data. So what it was showing is that an operator or an integrator who had an algorithm could now implement it on an open platform through an SDK and influence the behavior of the RAN. I think that's totally novel, because as Logan said, I mean, we were coming from the SON world, which was very closed with the vendor lock-in, and we've been able to show that Open RAN was also bringing this openness in terms of innovation in RAN optimization algorithm. So we did that in 2019. And that's a journey that we've kept on doing, and in which we've kept on investing with Sonic Labs. Obviously, we are currently doing some RIC interop with various vendors, but also on the market in different segments, not only with operators, but showing the value of a RAN intelligent control in the context of private 5G network, where automation and optimization are also key elements. Now, I think what's important, back to your question, Paul, in terms of the RIC, is to make sure that we don't create another set of silos, right? I think the RIC needs to remain open, and I think that's also a very key element for component vendors like ourselves. I think we are component vendors. We don't have any vested interest in terms of equipment. So it's important that we don't create silos of rig platform for a various set of vendors to the benefit, I think, of the operator and the innovator. The second point I wanted to bring up next to this risk of making sure that we don't want to create silo is the fact that the rig is a true enabler for innovation. Currently working with Digital Catapult on this ideate concept, where we're going to bring a rig platform and have a set of innovators from the UK, small enterprises that want to develop XApp and that now have a playground for innovation. That's very important. That's the only way that you can provide an innovation vehicle on a domain which is as complex as the RAN. So making complex things simple through a software development kit that is accessible to any enterprise. So those are two elements which we are strongly working on. AI is another one, certainly a key element. I mean, we've been working a lot on things like energy optimization in the context of other DCMS funded activities, or DCIT now, like RE5G, the Frank project. So this is certainly an area in which we are investing a lot, and we will keep on investing. And again, like what I said before, this is for us a journey. I think there's still a lot of work to be done, but we need to make sure that this remains an open ecosystem for innovation.
And Rafael?
Sure. As I mentioned, new real-time rig and XApps is something we are delivering here additionally to Sonic Labs Cohort 3. I believe that this is a great opportunity for a bit of transparency in the end solution, because customers can get features and algorithms which are transparently integrated into the end product, which is contrary to what we have today, when there is like closed solution without any transparency. So that's amazing for me. Another thing is that RIG allows for radio resource management. This is of paramount importance, I believe. This is also at the core of our activity, our intellectual property. Radio resource management is super important in terms of dense networks, more dense networks than we have today. And we have to have more dense networks because the traffic need grows exponentially. So there is no other way than making our networks more dense. And more dense networks means that more interferences. So the RRM is radio resource management is the necessity and is the answer for it. Sorry, I'm also using some acronyms. I am the marketing guy, so I believe that when I use those difficult words, I look smarter among technical people. So that's the reason. Thank you.
No, thank you. I was going to mention that as well. We mentioned SON a lot. I worked on self-optimized or organized. I never worked out which one it was. But I worked. It depended. Yeah, I worked on that 10 years ago. It never really took off. It was great ideas in the 4G network. This was like 10 plus years ago, but it never really took off. And I think that's what this openness that we're talking about and bringing in different vendors is all about. It's about bringing innovators in. We as Digital Catapult are all about innovation and trying to do that. And so that's what we're trying to bring here. And I just wonder, Arno, unfortunately for me, mentioned a couple of things I was going to talk about. Like we've got multiple vendors working together, and in our pre-discussion we're discussing what's the value in doing that, because you've got similar kind of products in similar spaces, but and how do you see that as like helping? I mean, innovation I think is really important, but do you see that? And do you see the sort of the fact that you're working together or not necessarily together, you're all in the same environment working on it? Do you think that's a useful thing? And Arno's already mentioned, so I'll pick up with the Lorcan.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about transparency, and plug and play is a bit too far, but at least connected or make interoperability. I think if we're not careful, what we end up with is things like RIC of RICs. Like you need somebody to do a RIC of RICs, or the evolution of SON, which sort of failed because it wasn't interoperable enough. Exactly, yeah. And this whole the RIC stuff has kind of evolved to the SMO story, and how do I do service management and orchestration in the radio network. Right? So I think having all the bits in one place allows us to normalize some of the interfaces and actually test things and prove they work. And that is hugely valuable in demystifying what can actually be bought, what can actually be deployed. That's huge valuable, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree, because I think if we want to get innovators, someone from outside of this ecosystem to write an application, they need to know that it can be used in multiple places. If it can only be used in one particular, as you said, Rick, silo, then that really limits the benefits of their investment in development. Raphael, I don't know if you had any thoughts around bringing innovators into.
I believe that we need to work together because the customers are expecting to have ready solution, are waiting for this solution. So we need to sort out among ourselves how to create this best product, how to develop the best product market needs. And when we are ready, we can go and introduce our solution. So that's the biggest takeaway from the collaboration we have here, and it's great importance for us. I mentioned those partnerships we've built. So there is no other place globally I could risk where we could, in a safe environment, test various features and learn from one another, and then deploy those findings in commercial networks.
I don't know if you had any further.
I just want to paraphrase what I already said, but I think to us it's very important that we keep an open ecosystem. Right? I think that's quite important, because I don't think that we can solve, let's say, all the problem on our own. Right? I think we are small companies, and we need to also focus on what we're good at, and also recognize that some people are focusing on very niche problems. I think the world is made up of a lot of very small niche problems that are worth being solved, right? And not a single company can solve that. So I think there's a lot of richness in collaboration.
No, I agree. That's when sort of my thought on this whole thing is that as you say, if you've got very small problems, they for a very big company, it's quite hard for them to. You're a very big company, so you might have to focus on something small. But a very small company might think, I can actually solve this specific problem, and it's a really good business for them. And that way, we can solve things. There's problems as self-organized networks. The automation of networks has been a problem for as long as I've been in the industry. And it's never been solved, and I'm still perplexed as to why. But I think it's in part of that, because lots of small problems that need real focus from probably smaller organizations. One thing, remember we have some questions at the end. I don't think, so if anyone's online has got questions, I don't think we've got any yet. And if you can all think in the room about things you'd like to ask with my panel guests here. The next question is shifting a bit to where Stephen's sort of center is around. So in terms of the more mature, probably the more mature part of the openness that's being carried out in Open RAN has been around the radio unit and connecting to the rest of. So the actual the bit that sends radio signals out, and that's where Stephen has been working. So that's been the mainstay of a lot of the interoperability work. And my question is, has it been getting easier for you working in this? And also, what do you see as the next steps? Where would you like to continue to push the ecosystem forward? What's your interest?
Absolutely, those are very good questions. So as we remember, the mobile industry was built by large monolithic companies, the likes of Nokia, Ericsson, the tier 1 vendors. But this new paradigm of openness and interoperability of smaller companies, the potential we have working together, of course, is to drive innovation at a far higher speed. As we mentioned earlier, focus on some of the small nitty-gritty problems. Many of our colleagues will solve those problems, and therefore the opportunity is to innovate at a far higher pace. And looking at 5G itself, the demands on people like us, the radio vendors, are much higher than they were in the 4G, 3G, 2G period. There are far more bands, different power levels, there are small cells, femtocells, massive MIMO. The alphabet spaghetti gets even bigger when we get towards the radio. So therefore the challenge on us to provide cutting-edge products is larger and larger. And we're of course delighted to be in Sonic Labs and doing some of that here. And therefore, for the future of 5G is where it's going. Faster, the pace is quicker than it was in those previous eras. We believe that this interoperability and, in fact, pushing forward the boundaries of the possible, focusing on the new topics, the energy consumption, the efficiency, particularly of radios, but also of the server hardware behind it, to make sure that the future connectivity we all want and need is going to be done in a sensible power envelope and an efficiency manner. commensurate with ecological and green goals too.
Great, thank you. And in terms of, sorry, I was just confused myself a bit. So in terms of the what I'd like to ask you now is considering the experience that you've had of working in this. You've mentioned in terms of like working with other organisations bring forward. What would you like to see as the next thing that you work on? I think some of you touched on a couple of points so far, but what would you like to do next with this kind of environment? And also, and how would that help, I guess, the industry as a whole? I'd be interested, as well as as in the whole ecosystem, as well as your specific views of this. Arnaud, I wonder if you can pick that one up.
Yes, as you say, I touched on that already, but I think for us in that journey, I think what will become important at some point is that, let's say, one of the cohort, or I don't know what form that will be, gives the opportunity to move to field trials, right? Not only to stay in the lab, but also to get to real deployment in collaboration with operators. So really moving from the lab to some pre-commercial deployment, I think that's certainly one key area. Next engagement, obviously, is the exposure to maybe more mature vendor, if I may say, in terms of interop. I think that's also important because if you look at the ecosystem without getting into details, you certainly have some front runners in terms of size and in terms of existence, but I think there's a benefit for, let's say, the challengers to mingle with them, and for the operators to have the choice, and for the integrators to also have that opportunity to integrate with, let's say, with bigger challengers, if I may say. And then the third point, we touched upon that as well, is to me the RIC as a topic and RAN intelligence in general is certainly something that we want to see developed. And I think where I think Sonic Labs has a strong role to play in terms of fostering that innovation from the local ecosystem, not only in the form maybe of a cohort, but maybe something longer term where, let's say, a permanent, let's say, playground and, let's say, test bed could be set up for innovators to come and develop on new use cases which are keep on evolving on RAN intelligence and automation.
Great, thank you. And who next? Logan,
I can have a go. Yeah. So yeah, I think that emphasis on system requirement. How do we figure out some common requirements, volumes of different sizes and shapes of products that will help us cost reduce the solutions? At the moment, there's lots of complexity still, I think. Different FPGAs, different accelerators, all sorts of different choice. We need to make that easier. We can automate a lot of that between us. So I think being able to do that, and then that system release process. Steve mentioned at the end of the kind of plug and play part, there ends up being some performance testing. And if I've got 7 or 8 radio layers to build in terms of a macro layer, I could be up for $2.5 to $5 million worth of performance test equipment, right? I mean, somebody has to figure that part out, right? Because otherwise our operators can't buy it or our enterprise customers can't buy that. So some way maybe of leveraging the other labs in the ecosystem, whether it's US or I think we've Katya here from I14Y. How do we get that process going? Because we're all engaged in all those activities, I think, as well, for the most part. How do we scale that and how do we reduce the cost of system release?
Good, thank you. And Rafael?
I think that Sonic Labs is doing a great job in terms of bringing partners together, promoting industry as a whole. It's a great benefit for the industry. However, I think that there is a need of putting together us who bring capabilities to the table with those organizations, people who need those capabilities. So it's about bridging, supply us with the demand. But it's happening through such events like today. It can be achieved through like more events like this, more events with the industry, promoting among the industry, and I believe this is like natural next step.
Great, thank you. So some of the things you mentioned, I think you mentioned field trials. So that's something that we're looking at. Very much the logic that you had. So some of these ideas were put together a while ago. So I'm quite pleased. And this wasn't set up. This was just your answers. But I'm quite pleased that some of these answers have come back. So for the example of a field trial, we always thought that would be another a natural step, because when you take something, so hopefully you can see a bit later on, we've got the lab visit. You see in the lab, you've got a certain environment, it's quite well understood. But when you take something to somewhere else, every time you do that, things break. We find that from when these kind of products have actually brought into our lab, things that should have worked, didn't work. And there's a whole process of trying to find out why that is. So field trial, I think is really, really good. You mentioned, and you were mentioning system requirements. I just want to pick up on that a little bit, because I think in terms of the system requirements, I'm not sure what you were covering, whether it was both the kind of, you mentioned the hardware environment that it sits on, whether you think that's important, or whether it's actually the deployment environment. So whether it's like because there's private networks or small cells, or which
a bit of both, coming from where do we think we can actually deploy Open RAN at any sensible scale, right? So we've done quite a bit with the Mavenir folks, for instance, on Open RAN in Dish, right? But that's greenfield 5G. We've got 4G, 5G things to do in Europe, maybe some more, even down as far as 2G, right? And do we do that in dense urban? Do we do it in enterprise? So those scenarios, roughly some idea of the volumes that might be needed for those, and then that helps us drive out the cost and simplify the testing environments as well.
Do you have any sense of where you would go first on
yeah, I think you're doing the right stuff. I think the dense urban underlay. I think we'd had some challenge conversations with the BT folks before, and how do we do some dense urban bits, and then the enterprise indoor. I think they're the two natural parts, right? There's an evolution required of what we all did on small cells, and then there's how do I automate the overall network after that.
Yeah. Has anyone else got any thoughts of where you would go to first in that kind of like deployment scenario? No?
Yeah, sure. So obviously taking stuff out of the lab into the field is very important. Demonstrate the capabilities of our end-to-end solutions. And looking at the diverse use cases. Some people think that macro as being the number one goal, and in 5G, that's what's deployed in most countries around the world is the macro sites. But then to give real coverage around cities, we look at the small cells, the dense overlay, and how that can be achieved. Multi-operator overlays have been discussed, because the cost on one operator is too high. So there are plenty of things to go and do that, and use this really as an opportunity to show how this can work end-to-end in a multi-vendor interoperable environment.
Great. Any other thoughts?
And just maybe to complement, as far as you're concerned, we started using Open RAN in private 5G networks and in neutral hosts. So I think these were the interesting playgrounds for us to start with, because they are also very prone to innovation. And so I think that's really a first area we'd like to see targeted.
I can only second that private networks, private 5G networks is something we'll witness as first ones, and then we'll see massive rollouts, but this is like the order, so I would second what you, Arnold, said.
It's good to hear from our perspective. One of the reasons, because exactly as you say, that we've worked in Digital Catapult on private networks for a very long time, so Dritton's team has been doing that for a very long time, in part for the reason you say that's where it was able to get innovation of like proving use cases, so that's good to hear. And also the other thing you mentioned about RAN intelligence and getting in the innovators. So this is something I think Linda's going to talk about a bit later in terms of what we're doing with, you mentioned Ideate. Again, it's an internal term, so you'll learn more about that later, so apologies. And we would like to create that permanent playground. That was something that I was really keen on right at the beginning, because I think if you want to use AI and machine learning, you need data. So where do you get that data from? You need deployed field type network. So that's something else that we want to bring into the future things. So I think now we're about time for questions. So I wonder if there's any questions in the room. We have one. And so one of you will have to lend your this one. And questions online as well. I don't think we've got any at the moment, but if you would like to.
Hi, thank you. I'm Keith Dyer from the Mobile Network. You talked quite a lot about meeting requirements of deployers. So what is the mechanism for them to connect with Sonic to make sure you're integrating products they're interested in? And then after that, are there any other levers that, say, DSIT could pull to push through more deployment of the solutions you're developing?
So, supposed to be questions for the panel, but if you're asking about what's Sonic Labs doing, it's probably best if I answer. But I'll answer and then I'll hand over. So in terms of what we're doing, one of the things that we are creating, I think it was put on on Joe's slide, the idea of dissemination and events, and that's part of the purpose of things like this, is to bring together the different organisations so that they can meet each other and have some dialogue. As well as that, we also created, as part of the Sonic Labs sort of setup, industry groups with explicitly the intent to talk with the people who are interested in Open RAN products and to get their feedback on what was important to them. And so that we can, because what we're trying to do, I mean, I see this as like a product market fit. What we're trying to do is to help get the right products fit for the UK specific market. And to do that, you really need to understand what the market wants. So that's part of that dialogue, really trying to understand what they want. So with something mentioned, I think something specifically for the UK is network sharing seems to come up more and more compared to other countries. Other countries do have sharing, but I think the UK has a bit more, it's more kind of like higher up the list of what needs to be done. So just trying to understand that and then help people who want to bring their products to the UK market to understand what those needs are and then develop their products to fit. That's kind of my view. So sort of dissemination events and also some direct industry groups that can give us advice that then we can share. And it's the idea is that it's beneficial, that they get benefits as well. So I don't know if anyone else has comments on what in terms of the sort of getting. I think the question was around like how do you get the feedback from the potential adopters of or people who would be buying Open RAN systems.
I'll take a little go at some of that in terms of where I think it comes from, right? So that we talked kind of two scenarios, underlay or overlay, right? Depending which way you look at the dense urban part, right? That's still mostly operator driven, I think, right? Has a heavy involvement often with the cities in terms of fiber, ducting, all that sort of stuff, right? So I think there's how do you bring that community together? I think, Paul, you're pretty good at that, right? Getting those communities of people, stakeholders sharing that. And there's some evolution of the work that was done in Telecom Infra Project, which I think we could pick up on straight away. The enterprise one is trickier, right? Because the enterprise one is sort of easier to build for, but harder to sell to in volumes, right? They're used to buying Wi-Fi just about by now, right? They ship Wi-Fi in large volumes. They have a tendency to think a radio of this size and shape is worth this kind of price, right? So we have work to do there to get our overall solutions to the right price point. And it also has to be built for channels or system integrators to be able to sell the thing, because there's a large amount of people can sell Wi-Fi today, but can't necessarily sell private 5G or 5G enterprise use cases. Often that neutral host requirement for the enterprise, they don't understand why it's hard for the operators to just roam on their network. So I think we could do some encouraging in the UK as to how that works. And those requirements would be, I think, the ones that will block scaling in enterprise for that private 5G use case. Getting it to the right price points, getting it to the channels that people are used to buying from, and then getting it deployed in scale. And then the underlay or overlay, dense urban. How do we actually get the operators in some of the city communities together? And it's not always London, right? Sometimes it can be other cities like Southampton or Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool. Pick a city, right? We can go do some work there.
Did you?
Yeah, I can add a small amount to that. In fact, what Morgan's saying is the complexity of a 5G network is approximately 10 times higher than a Wi-Fi network. It is. Wi-Fi is well understood. You may have a controller or not, and some APs. But for an enterprise to take on designing and never mind integrating as a multi-vendor Open RAN system, that's a huge deal. So one of our strategic imperatives at Cable Free is to provide trusted, proven, interoperable ecosystems, working with partners, so that an enterprise can come along and say, we want to buy one. Fully supported end-to-end. That's a huge breakthrough moment, I think, for Open RAN and particularly for the participants here in Sonic Labs.
So can you? Sorry.
Thank you. Feedback from actual installations. This is one thing, but another is something we should expect from the network, like stability in end-to-end chain. So we should maintain the same level of stability while swapping devices, for example. So this is what we are practicing here at Sonic Labs, because the customer needs to get the same high level of stability. It doesn't matter which device he's taking out and taking in. So this is what we were trying, and we managed to achieve here.
And just picking up a question from online, probably picking up the same point, but a bit more specifically. Are you seeing any specific 3GPP implementations or implementations relating to the kind of like the physical deployment of the towers that you need to be concerned about, or is it not at that level of detail at this stage for the UK market? I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts. So, for example, specific devices and how they're optimized for the UK for the UK MNO networks.
I could dive side on that one. So you're quite right. If you look at a modern cell site today, it's multi-band, multi-technology. You'll find 2G, 4G, 5G on the same tower. Maybe the 3G has been pensioned off or refarmed. So for the operator, that's a huge amount of kit. You've got to power it, you've got to install it, and of course for the general public, that's a large amount of eyesore potential landscape. And now with densification, that's not a word in the dictionary, but everyone uses it. That means cell towers on every street corner almost, which is again public objections. So the real questions there are is can we, the vendors and the equipment designers, manufacturers, do something that's more in harmony with modern cities that includes all the technology required from modern 5G network, including the Open RAN case.
And I mean, the community, if you like, has done some of this thinking before, right? So, I mean, you wander around London, there are still examples of 3G and 4G small cells or femtos or various versions of them deployed. Some of them slightly less pretty than others, right? And I think I then took some of the work that had been done in London, and we did another version in Ireland in Dublin with this connected city infrastructure project with Telecom Infra, and we did basically put a bunch of comms equipment in big belly bins, so solar powered compactor bins, hid them in there, did monopoles for that. So I think getting to some standardized form factors for those that cities can consume will make a massive difference in getting the capacity at the right physical place in these cities.
So the physical footprint of the thing, that's well, Stephen's specific area.
So absolutely, it's all of us in sense of it's hardware. So if it needs compute platforms, they have to be included too.
Yeah, that's true.
Even thermal management, it's a big topic.
Yeah. Thank you. And I wonder if there's any other questions from. Oh, we got one. If you could say who you are and.
Hi, I'm Larson Harden. I'm with the 5G Challenge in the U.S. The panel mentioned desiring to avoid, RIC silos in the process. So the question I have is, how do you see doing that? I mean, do you expect to see an open source RIC that the industry adopts and associated SDK, or how can we get to that point where everybody's RIC is available for people to write X apps and R apps against?
I know if you.
But I think to me, it's not so much the question of the RIC itself. It's also the question of the vendor community, the RAN vendor community, and making sure that they implement standard that can be then used by the RIC vendors, right? And what you're mentioning, it's more the portability of the apps and the fact that you have SDK that can be comparable, right? I don't think that today this is the main issue. The main issue is how can we make sure that when you have a RIC platform, whether it's coming from ISOS, from Axeran, from VMware, it can plug on any vendor equipment, and that these vendors implement the standards which have been specified and in an open manner, right? That this data is accessible so that a company, an innovator that would have developed an app, be that an X app or an R app, can be used on any of these vendors' kit, right? Maybe with slight adaptation, it's a bit like, when you develop for iOS or Android, you can port. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but that's not the issue, but you know that you're going to find roughly the same data, right? Today, the main issue that we see is more the speed of adoption of standards like E2, for instance, or others, like O1 by the vendor community than the RIC and the SDK themselves.
So
part of that, there is the ONF already have an open source RIC, right? I mean, we've worked with it. We've all probably played with it at some points in time, right? The issue always becomes when the operator gets involved, they want somebody to blame. Right? So somebody has to take some penalties, and somebody has to take responsibility for delivery. So I think that's where it gets a little bit trickier about using pure open source components for some of that. I think I think activities like this, where a little bit of money is placed to help the interop, help really expose the E2 interfaces, get the right performance information out, get the right scheduler information out. That's the bit that makes massive difference, right? And then working as a community, whether it's in the US or Europe, and the rest of those labs, figuring out how we get that information exposed and consistent will mean everyone's apps can be deployed quicker, regardless of which RICS it is, I think, yeah.
I was just going to touch on, so what you're saying, Arno, is that it's not just the application interface to the RIC, but it's also that interface from the RIC to the other elements, which is which I think the E2 and I can't remember the O1 for different. I think it's real time and non-real time, isn't it? Yeah. And to the other elements, so it's the whole system end to end, I guess you're saying. And you're saying that also the data. I mean, if looking at sort of machine learning, it's all about like getting data that you can work with. Are you saying standards for that needs to be more carefully looked after as well?
There's certainly that. I think for me the access to data is important, and there the operators have a strong role to play to provide data set that can be used for training certain algorithm or I mean, you can start from the usage of simulator. I mean, we're working with companies like Viavi, who have a RIC simulator, very interesting to start with, but then you need also to have real-life data, real-life examples coming from operators where XApp and RAP can be tested. So I think that's an important step. So there's a whole, I would say, a DevOps process for app development, which starts from prototyping on a simple model, then using a simulator, and then moving to real-world implementation and testing. I think that's what we need to work towards, right? I mean, it's not only a question of platform, it's a question of making sure that all the players in the ecosystem are there so that you can build something that makes sense.
Yep, great, thank you. And Rafael, I don't know if you had any thoughts on.
Sure. So there are some things we already know how to do, and there are things we will discover during cohort 3, Sonic Labs cohort 3. We are working together to find the best solution for end customers. For example, we were together with VMware at MWC this year at your booth. And the discussions we are having with customers and experience from Sonic Labs, this allows us to work out the best model, I believe.
Great, thank you. I think we've got time for one question. There's a question online about international cooperation, but I think that is better placed for the next one. But if we have a question, Ian.
Hi, it's Ian Ginn, representing in Manta. Interesting discussion. One of the thoughts that went through my head about how it actually works, what I mean by that is each person going into the lab and trying to figure it out for themselves and just use it as a resource? Or are you set as a cohort, as a group, to say there's a problem that we want to fix or look at together? And I also imagine there's quite a lot of learning that could be done between learning people in the value chain, or let's say you're plugging into someone else, you also want to know what they want to know. So you're not just making it work from your side, but it's also that interoperability and sharing of knowledge. Maybe you can share more on that.
Anyone want to go? So while you're thinking in terms of the cohort, so what at the moment we are focusing on end-to-end interoperability. So there's kind of like a base level, get the thing working. Actually, we'll cover it a bit later. Get the thing working. And then, but we're also trying to have a little focus on different types. So you might say this is focused on indoor, this is focused on outdoor, because I think, and certainly the feedback from here is we need to start thinking a bit more about the specific use cases, not just. Sorry, I hate telecoms. People say use case 1 minute, right? Okay, but not specific use cases, as in the specific thing it's trying to do. So that's really important. But we try and do that as part of the setting up of the cohort. So I don't know if anyone's got any comments on your experience of.
I think I can only second what you say. I think that when we set up the cohort, I think from a vendor perspective, the way we see it, I think it's very collaborative as well, right? I think there's a lot of interactions in terms of. I think we're not doing testing for the sake of doing testing and interop for the sake of doing interop. I think there's always an end goal, and I think there's also we are giving input as vendors as to what makes sense for us at a given point in time, based on what we've done, based on what we are engaged in, based on we were talking about market requirements. I think the input that we are providing are also based on what we see from the market, from current engagements, right? So, and I think Digital Catapult and Sonic Labs have been very understanding of that, right? Trying to take or input into consideration to make things that make sense end to end. So so far it's been working very collaboratively, I would say.
Great. Thank you. And so I think it's time we're over. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much to all the questions and for your interest in this, and especially thank you to my to the panel for joining me on here and having an interesting conversation about this. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and to all of our panelists for sharing your experience with us today, and also your thoughts on innovation in Open RAN. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but for now, we've come to the end of the first part of this event, and I would like to thank our audience online. Have a break, and we'll see you back at 1:30. So thank you for watching us so far. And for you all in the room, I hope you've enjoyed your break, and those offline as well, and those in the room who have had fun looking at our live demos. So it's time for our next panel, where we bring you insights from some of the leading international organizations that alongside Sony Labs have joined in the Open RAN mission to make networks more agile and future-proof. And chairing this panel is Dr. Dritan Kaleshi, Director of 5G Technology at Digital Catapult, and I would like to invite him to the stage now to welcome our guest speakers. Thank you, Dritan.
Okay, for the people that are here, I do apologize because this is the second time that you'll be hearing from me, but I genuinely will try very, very hard that you hear more from the other people in the panel than from myself. And the reason for us to set up this panel was primarily, as I spoke in the lab to the people in the audience and for people that are online, it is primarily that while Sonic is very, very strongly focused to have a specific and direct impact into the UK ecosystem and the UK telecom supply chain diversification, we are very, very much aware as parts of the industry, as members of the industry, an active part of the industry, that this is an international activity. And in this international activity, the direction of travel in open networks is very, very clear. It was very clear from the Mobile World Congress as a direction of travel. And whilst there is a maturity of the products, as you heard from the first panel today, there are still kind of challenges around mismatch of the
product development and the development cycles, mismatching to regional specifications, in some cases incomplete and still work item specifications, for example, in the RIC between 3GPP and O-RAN Alliance as one example, and as well as other aspects. And in this panel, it's a privilege for me to effectively have in the panel representatives from across the stakeholders around the world to effectively look at how the initiatives and the engagement in this space, A, is producing some results, what are the experiences in these other locations, and B, how we can align better or integrate and collaborate a bit more strongly so that we accelerate what we are doing in a regional context. So without further ado, and that will be probably the last to hear from me, apart from the questions, I would like to invite the panelists. So Simon Burley, in no particular order, but in the order that it has been printed for me. Simon Burley, which is Emerging Technology Program Director at Ofcom, and as a representative of Sonic, it's very, very hard for a regulator to remove his hat, but still. Katja Henke, Senior Innovation Project Manager at Emerging Technologies in I-14 YLAM from Germany. Julie Koop, Program Leads, Department of Defense, and the NTIA 5G Challenge in US, and I leave the rest of the acronyms for Julie to do. And also John Van Orden, Head of PLM Engineering, NEC Europe, and the Director of Engineering for the NEC Center of Excellence in the UK. Please come and join me. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us today. So without further ado, if we can start by kind of in the order we are sitting from the furthest to here. So from John with the opening question, can you introduce the organization and also your involvement in Open RAN? What are your activities?
Thank you, Tristan. So my name is John Van Orden. I'm the Head of Engineering for the 5G Center of Excellence at NEC Europe, based here in the UK. NEC's been involved in Open RAN for a number of years now. We act both as a product vendor, but also as a system integrator. And as my role in the 5G Center of Excellence, it was established 3 years ago now to try to accelerate the adoption of Open RAN in the global market. We really focus in my lab. I've got access to multiple labs, but really I'm here talking about the lab based in the UK. So my lab here in the UK is focused primarily on Open RAN integration of 5G massive MIMO radios. That's what it specializes on. So we have a number of technologies available to us that allow us to test not only over the air using an anechoic chamber, but also with conductive technology as well. So we've got propagation simulators that help us to really validate and focus on proving to the operator community, because that's our main focus, that Open RAN not only works as a technology, but also performs as a technology. I think that's really key.
Julie.
Yes, my name is Julie Cubb. I'm with the U.S. Department of Commerce, National Telecommunications and Information Administration, and Institute of Telecommunication Sciences. So somebody once at the beginning said acronyms are part of telecom. Acronyms are very part of the U.S. government as well. So I am the 5G Challenge Program Leader. This is a collaborative effort with the U.S. Department of Defense because they are very interested in Open RAN for their private networks that they need for their critical missions for the United States. And this effort was started in 2022. In fact, we had our 2022 5G Challenge in September of last year, where we announced winners for RU, CU, and DU vendors who did wraparound emulation testing and then end-to-end system integration testing. And so there was a CU, DU, and RU that had never integrated with before, and we tested both 3GPP and O-RAN Alliance standards and specifications. And this year, we are pleased that we just announced on March 8th, we have 7 different vendors, 8 different subsystems to do 2 sets of mobility testing for our 2023 5G challenge on both Viavi and Keysight. And this challenge will be 24 weeks, and we will have a closing ceremony on September 21st. And contestants are competing to win a prize pool of $7 million US in prizes and funding.
Thank you, Julie.
Wow. Katja Henke, I'm standing in here for the I14Y lab, which is based in Berlin. And it's an industry activity, but publicly funded by the German Ministry of Digitalization and Transport. And we are a consortium of 11 partners. And among these partners are also 3 operators, 3 major operators, Deutsche Telekom, Vodafone, and Telefonica. And our goal is really to accelerate time to market for disaggregated telco systems, so nothing new to you. But with a strong focus, or with a current focus on Open RAN. And at the same time also driving the ecosystem, the community. Because it's not only the technology, it must also come along with how to really get the community on board. And it's an open lab. Open lab means then really that we invite players to come to the lab, be it a small and medium enterprise, but also the big ones. And our goal is really to not only run PlugFest, but to have end-to-end settings, which end then in certification, so that it helps really to foster the overall development for market-ready products.
Thank you. Simon?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Simon Burley, and I'm a member of the Communications and Media Technology team within Ofcom. Within our team, we basically want to anticipate rather than react to new and enabling technology trends, and we see Open RAN as one of those trends that we definitely need to keep a close eye on. But our involvement in Open RAN also is clearly linked with our work with our partner Digital Catapult in the Sonic Labs, where we are essentially playing our part in helping support UK government in delivering on their 5G supply chain diversification strategy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all of you. So moving immediately on, following the introduction. So in your experience, we all have that element of a passion and have certainly moved forward on designing the interventions from the industry, from an operator industry environment, from government challenges, and from the regulator. So what do you see as challenges in regards to the Open RAN development in your countries or regions, or within the industry, from your particular stakeholder perspective, but also regionally and internationally? How do you see that? And how do you think your intervention is helping overcome those in those regions? You can start. You give me a sign. Your mic moved first.
I looked at you. That is okay. Absolutely fine. I mean, in general, the Open RAN requires global standards. And that is really needed if you really want to leverage the full potential for deployment in the operator environment. The point is really, I mean, when you talk then about the brownfield deployments, you have to take into account that, for speaking now for the European perspective, that it also requires, for example, the support of 2G or 4G in the vRAN. So that is something labs like the I14Y lab will then take these requirements and will then, at these standards, and really, I wouldn't call it translate, but define that in blueprints and reference architectures, so that you then really open up the room for this testing and certification in this case. And that brings really the direct link to the operators. But of course, we need to take into account the specifica and then really to foster a coordinated, let's say, European profile and blueprints where you can test against.
Thank you. Julie, from a US perspective?
Yeah, so in our 2022 5G challenge, what we actually did is we tested CU, DU, and RU components with the 3GPP standards and ORAN Alliance specifications. And one of the things we found very useful is we first did a wraparound emulator testing to make sure that people could conform to specs and standards, because that's a big part of the problem. We're not really to plug and play. That's what the challenge is supposed to facilitate, is true plug and play and open, interoperable, secure components. But we find that it takes a lot of work just to kind of test what we have. And so we first did a wraparound emulator, and then we did the end-to-end testing. And we did this testing with cold pairings, which means that vendors had never come together before. And for the wraparound emulator, it was 1 week of prep and 2 weeks of testing. That's it, to pass and get a prize. And then for the end-to-end system integration, 5 weeks. So this is very different than PlugFest, where a lot of folks already had partners and came and spent months and months. We want to show that it can be done very quickly, and we're going to do a similar type of thing this year. One of the biggest problems and challenges that we saw is, and I had a boss when I first started in 1992 for the federal government, who said the nice thing about standards is there's so many to choose from. And I just laugh at that because you know, there's a lot that we found that was a big problem. There's different interpretations of the specs and standards. There's different options. There's mandatory, conditional, mandatory, optional, you know, all these different things. And it was really hard. Our host lab is Cable Labs, who was used to working in Wi-Fi to get vendors to work together. It's really hard to interpret that, even the difference between 15.3 to 15.6. Some went from optional to mandatory, and vendors had it was the vendors, the host lab, and the test vendors that all had to come together. And really going from these specs and standards down to test cases, down to test and automation is really one of the biggest challenges we saw. On the other hand, for a positive thing from our challenge, vendors were very open to interoperating. Of course, so maybe that was part of it, but they really did. I've seen this coming together where, you know, it's a coopetition, you know, they call it. So coopetition, where, you know, if Open RAN is going to survive, vendors need to be able to come together to solve these problems.
Thank you, Julie. And John, from an industry vendor kind of lamp perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think the challenges have changed over time, obviously, as you'd expect. So I think if you go back to the early days, the question was, does Open RAN work? Can you make it work? Can you integrate multi-vendor and make the multi-vendor ecosystems work? I think we're now beyond that point. I think we've proven that, yes, multi-vendor ecosystems can be made to work thanks to the initiatives around Open RAN, Alliance, getting the standards to a point where people start to be able to understand and interpret them in a common way. You make the point about interpretation of standards is a key one. So we're beyond the point of proving that Open RAN can be made to work. The next challenge is how can we address the market and actually get Open RAN adopted widely into the market. And one of the problems that is still being worked on, I think we're making some good progress, Sonic Labs being part of that progress, is to take the complexity away from the end customer. In this context, the end customer is the community, or it could be the enterprise, the Open RAN sort of private network space. So by creating, I think actually you mentioned the key word there, blueprints, by creating blueprints that so this is how you make this work, these are how you glue things together, and making that available to the target customers that you're trying to address, that really helps progress the conversation to the next level. And then people start looking at, okay, I know it works, I know how to make it work, how can I use it? And that's the stage that we are at now, I think.
I think it's, you know, the points have already been made really, in the sense that, you know, that for Open RAN to work, you know, to try and create, you know, a new supply chain and ecosystem where new players can enter the market and play to their strengths, providing, you know, subsystems and components rather than having to compete at a full solution level. You know, to try and create that type of environment, you know, collaboration really is key. So, Sonic Labs is playing its part in this respect by building a commercially neutral environment where, our primary focus is on the integration and interoperability challenges, or trying to identify those challenges when you're trying to build, a multi-vendor solution, to try and identify some of these issues at an early stage so that we can then start to help shape and accelerate the maturity and the development of this sort of new way of building a radio access network. I think is quite a key strand that we're trying to do here in the Sonic Labs.
Thank you very much. Just to remind the participants online that the question online are open as well. I will want to kind of ask a couple of more questions to the panel before I was quite pleased that I met some of you and some of the people in the room in Mobile World Congress, and it was very clear that one of the three biggest themes about open and velocity, I'm not commenting on that, was about open networking and open RAN and open interfaces, as well as a very, very strong gear shift towards 5G whilst the industry is preparing for 6G. From your perspectives, from what you are seeing in the labs, from the industry into the Sonic Labs, Simon, and through the challenge and in I14Y, both as an OTIC lab as well as an OTIC lab, I'll leave it at that. What do you see? How do you see the progress of the Open RAN? As you said, it's at the moment we are looking to take the complexity away. What is your four of you the assessment as to where the products are at the moment, especially when we know that in certain countries, including UK, there is a certain deadline for the introduction of the Open RAN solutions into operator environments. So what are your views? I will start on this side this time. So Simon, go first on the UK side.
So I think within the Sonic Labs, we are looking at products that are at a slightly earlier stage, not quite that sort of commercially ready solutions. So this is more at the sort of technology readiness levels of sort of 5 to 7. So it is very interesting to see, as we build and shape the cohorts that come into the labs, we do see a level of maturity that does actually grow and increase over the time in which they spend with us in the labs. And there are a number of partners, who've brought along, slightly different products in each cohort, but some of those same organisations have been with us right from the start, and it's fantastic to see the journey that they're coming along in terms of the level of maturity that they're now starting to achieve. But I think it's already been mentioned, that the ORAN Alliance specifications are still relatively young in their sort of journey. So we are going to see issues in terms of there will be some gaps in the standards that still need to be addressed, and we'll also see organisations that will interpret those standards or specifications rather in a slightly different way. So the Sonic Labs really does give organisations a great opportunity to try and collaborate and work with other vendors to then try and sort of hone out some of these interpretational issues that people may that may be sort of baked in some of these solutions, to try and iron them out so that they prepare them for the next stage of their journey for commercial readiness and success here in the UK.
Julie, from a US perspective, I'm trying to mix the countries and keep it interesting. So come on. I need a bit of fun.
Yeah, so with the 2022 5G challenge, we had 9 people submit for contestants, and in 2023 we had 23. So in 2022 we did CU, DU, and RU as separate. In 2023 we decided to combine the CU and DU and add the mobility testing with both NG and X and handover, because we just didn't see CU and DU being separated as much as we thought they might, and we wanted to have more vendors come and be able to participate. So 23 vendors, I think, is quite a lot of contestants. So I think that alone kind of shows that there's a lot more just in a year time of people joining our challenge and submitting. So I think that's fantastic. When we first started this challenge, we kind of had hoped that we could jump right into the RIC and the XApps, and we quickly realized we had to start with more foundational pieces like CU, DU, and RU. However, we're also going to be announcing early this summer, we're going to have a RIC XApp forum in the United States in Boulder, Colorado. It's a lovely place to come. It might be in Boulder, might be in Dallas, Texas. We're still kind of deciding where we're going to have it, but it will be somewhere in the United States. So people are welcome to come and showcase and demo a RIC XApp. We realize the RIC and the XApp aren't quite ready for the rigorous testing that we might want to do, so this is not going to be a challenge. It's going to be an ability to showcase. But we're seeing a lot of progress in the RIC and the XApp space, and so that could be an area of interest, to see where the market is and show some technical details as to where folks are in the market in terms of that.
Thank you. John, from both UK industry perspective, whichever angle you want to take.
So I think what we've seen over the period that we've been working on, that NEC is in a unique position that we're not only a product vendors, we have our own products in this space, but also we integrate other people's products as well. Now, we'll probably come on to this in one of the later questions, but to address a global market, you need a very broad portfolio of products to be able to do that on the radio side. Every country's got their own spectrum policies, their own approaches for sharing out spectrum. Every customer has their own allocation of spectrum. I think if we go back a few years, there was very few vendors that were properly credible providing solutions into the Open RAN space. That has definitely changed. So I can see a breadth of vendors now coming along with products that are viable, that are addressing the requirements of the market, which is great. I think we're not only seeing that breadth coming in the radio space, but we're also seeing it in the platform space as well. So we're seeing people coming in with computes that are designed for working at the edge, on site, not just in data centers, which is brilliant. So that allows it going into telecom cabinets, for instance. We're also seeing diversification in terms of the technology on the processor side. So more vendors are coming in and looking at how their processor architectures can be used for Open RAN and adapting to that. And I think the final place where we're seeing some diversification, which is really interesting, is in the accelerator space as well. Acceleration is still a key part of getting the capacity into Open RAN. There are people that are doing it without acceleration, which is great, but in order to get the very high capacity, the very dense deployments, we still see a strong role for acceleration at the moment, and having multiple options when it comes to acceleration is helpful. The challenge we have to address as an Open RAN ecosystem is to try not to create another monopoly where just one architecture or one way of doing it becomes the dominant way of doing it, because that would sort of defeat some of the purposes of Open RAN and what we're trying to achieve. So seeing this diversification in vendors and approaches is really good.
Thank you very much, John. Katja.
Yeah, speaking about acceleration, and also, I mean, coming now more from the operator perspective, that the current situation is that each vendor has to go to each operator. You do not need to be a mathematician to know that it would be good to have more joint testing. The question is, I mean, what could be the ratio? Can we reach a level of saying, you know, a joint testing would be possible up to 80%? What can we gain here if we have such a joint testing? It is not only in terms of time, it would be also in terms of cost, and also, I mean, really sharing results. That would really help the whole development. Then, of course, there is, just say 20%, could be also 30%, which are then up to the operator, each operator, when it really comes to brass tacks in that way, where you really go commercial, go into all this product testing and so on and so forth. I think here is really a potential, and also in the automation then, of course, because what we definitely want is to avoid too much testing, a repetition of always doing the same things. But in general, I mean, I also like that there are more companies. That is exactly what we wanted.
So the maturity kind of is there, because of course we see a lot of kind of deployments, expansive field trials, including the ones that are coming up in the UK in the coming years. So increase maturity of the vendors, the ability to address the vendors, the maintaining the openness, which you, John, said, and more on the automation. If I can throw a bit of a curveball to the panel, we have a strategy for managing the curveballs, because I already I would like to try to propose a bit of a combined question, because leveraging from your answer before, which is, we all have been kind of operating for longer than 1 or 2 years, but specifically in the Open RAN space, it is a very nice, in my opinion, a combination of different stakeholders operating in the same space. So the question for me will be that there are lots of labs, different labs, and test beds globally, and they will probably do similar things, but slightly with different focus and with different purpose. What would you say between the two of you, and picking up on the last comment from Katja, very deliberately so, what would be like your primary focus, and also where would you see alignment, where the sum of the labs, through some collaboration, federation, alignment of activities, we can come together to effectively operate in that kind of global space where you said, where genuinely the vendors, especially for smaller new entrants into the market, will be extremely hard to operate in a global scale and matching different regions and others. So to repeat the question is, what would be your primary kind of focus, if you can repeat from earlier answers, and where do you see then a potential alignment, slight overlap, and collaboration between us internationally? Please, anyone that wants to start. John. Yeah.
Thank you. So, I mean, my lab is not currently a completely public lab as such. We're a vendor lab, so we use our lab for our own business purposes, with still the mission statement that we want to accelerate and promote open technology and open RAN. We always have target customers in mind. Now, because of that, my lab focuses at a higher technology readiness level than perhaps Sonic Labs does today. But we need a pipeline of vendors that have been through a level of testing and a level of proving to come into our lab and be ready for that final step of the qualification that the operators are wanting to see, ready to go into their networks. So I think if you look at where my lab is focusing at the moment, I keep calling it my lab, NEC's lab, sorry, I beg your pardon. It's not my lab. NEC's lab's focusing at the moment. We're focusing on particularly 5G. So the technology we have is focused very much on 5G. We have some 4G capability, but we're primarily focused on 5G. We've been focused mainly on massive MIMO radios now, which is a high technology, high complexity, and difficult to test, because that's where we saw the need and that's where the gap was at the time. As we move forward, what we would be really keen to see is I14Y Lab, Sonic Lab, creating blueprints of vendors that are known to work, that address the market demands that we're trying to address as well. And if appropriate, we could then take those products through our lab and get them to the stage where they are ready for acceptance with an end customer.
Thank you very much. Katja.
Yeah, I have to concentrate on. I mean, what we as I14Y Lab do is we drive the complementarity and the cooperation via certification and badges. So really with the goal to avoid too much repetition. In general, our focus is on open RAN, end-to-end market readiness. Of course, what is our idea is really to align among the operators the requirements. When it comes to labs, how many labs? Hosting all the possible vendor combinations is not that easy. So I think, or I personally would like if there is kind of a federation, so that there is really a healthy collaboration also. The question is just how to do that, and when I say just, it's not always easy. But in general, to understand, if we really go for this open approach, and openness is at the core of open RAN, how can we live such a federation?
Thank you. Julie?
Yeah, So when we designed our test cases for our 2022 5G challenge, it took quite a bit to go from 3GPP standards and O-RAN Alliance specifications down to the test cases. And we did a lot of, our host lab, Cable Labs, did a lot of manual testing last year. This year, our goal is, especially since we're now adding the mobility, NG and X handover, so we have a test plan for the RU, we have a wraparound emulated test plan for the RU, wraparound test plan for the CUDU, a test plan for the end-to-end system integration for the RU CUDU, and then as a G-Node B does handover to another G-Node B set of contestants, we also have a test plan for that. So this year we did put our test plans out on our website. You can go and you can see exactly how we went from the standards and the specs down to our test plan. But I think what we're seeing is if you really want to have this softwareization, which is where the market is going, what's enabling Open RAN, you really have to have repeatable testing. And part of our challenge that I haven't mentioned yet is the software bill of materials that we have all of our contestants provide. That's some effort that started within the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, our parent, to identify vulnerabilities in the supply chain. So if you really want to avoid some of the security issues, you have to keep your software up to date. What we've seen is a lot of people are afraid to update their software because they're afraid something's going to break, especially since there's so many components now in the chain. So if you have automated repeatable testing that makes it easier as you just like you plug in a card into your computer, and some people may remember the blue screen of death, that really things were not plug and play for hardware. But that's what we're going for with our challenge. Truly, you can plug something in, you can test it, certify it, change, upgrade software to fix a vulnerability, and then recertify. If that truly the system integrator can be more of an automated tool for you that you can use, then that will really facilitate, instead of this 6-month period cycle we've seen with some of the monolithic systems in the past, traditional RAN, that you can actually have updates happening, and you can try them in your lab and then push them to the field. So operators don't want to change their system and be afraid that they don't want to have any downtime. They want 24/7 operation. But that's what we really are thinking could be very useful. And I'm an engineer, so I always go from an engineering software standpoint. If we had that true CI/CD, continuous integration, all of that, just kind of baked into the process, I think that would also help the smaller vendors too be able to come in and easily be able to play and be assured, like with some sort of minimal viable product and minimal viable test cases that would be available for all operators, even though they have different profiles. If we could have something like that, then I think it's a lot easier for the whole community to take advantage of the innovation.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There are a number of sort of labs and initiatives around the world, all having their own slight different focus in terms of what they're wanting to do and achieve. But the one thing that all of them have in common is that basic process of building an Open RAN system with a collection of vendors, bringing them together. So, understanding those interoperability and integration challenges that can pose is something that we're focusing primarily on within the Sonic Labs. And I think it's already been mentioned this morning. As part of our program of work, we do have a number of industry working groups where we do bring vendors, test equipment providers, mobile network operators, and other labs from around the world as well. Bringing them all together to share those insights, those early learnings, so that we can then start to understand where there is so we can start exploiting synergies, understanding where we can start to complement each other to minimize duplication where possible, sharing test methodologies and processes, etc. All with a view then to try and help shape that process of building blueprints, moving towards that notion of test once, deploy many, which is something that's spoken about an awful lot. So hopefully this is all playing its part in trying to help shape that type of ecosystem.
Thank you so much, all four of you. And then just to remind everyone in the room as well as people online to get some questions going to us. Amazing. Let's go there, please. John. Yep. And if there is anyone, please flag it. Raise your hand now or online. Yes.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much. A very interesting panel. Thank you very much. And also very interesting tour earlier. I'm Falk Mahama from Vodafone. I have a question to probably all of you. You've mentioned a few times the importance of standards, in particular the discovery, as you all have access to very sophisticated labs, and in particular the open aspect to your labs. We have various people and various companies and coming together to collaborate. You will have a lot of insights in terms of these standards, what may need to be corrected, what may need to be clarified in the standards, whether it's 3GPP or Open RAN. Do you have a process to actually bring these back to Open RAN and 3GPP? And if yes, how is the process? Thank you.
Great question. Please.
So our host lab for the 5G challenge is Cable Labs, and they were the first actually U.S. North American OTIC lab, and actually their subsidiary Curio. And so they actually, as they're learning stuff and going through the testing, feed it right back up to the standards committee. So that's part of their whole process, and one of the reasons they became an OTIC lab.
Simon or John? Yeah, Simon first. John.
Yeah, I mean, our sort of path of trying to change proposals, etc., to the Open Alliance. Working with the suppliers, some of those are actually participants of the Open Alliance. So understanding, some of the any sort of problems that we do encounter that does require a modification or an addition or an enhancement to the specifications. They have that opportunity to then take that back into the Open Alliance and feed that back via that process.
It's a good question. I think the short answer is yes, of course. So as a product vendor, NEC has been active in the Open RAN Alliance for some time. So we're contributing in that space. We are sharing the learnings from our lab. We had some conversations with Sonic in the Sonic labs in the past, explaining our approach to testing and our methodologies. So we're keen to engage with the community and share the learnings and make sure that it's not just a small group of people that can make Open RAN work. It needs to be an industry that makes Open RAN work, and it's only through that collaboration will it succeed. So standards are important. They are part of the answer. I think developing the testing approaches and sharing the knowledge of how to test effectively is also equally important as well. And I think the work that Katja and Julie are doing here on a global level to try to achieve that, I think is really useful to the industry.
I just can tune in what Julie has said. So that is exactly the way, mirroring back that and building then, of course, of what, for example, ORAN Alliance or TIP are creating as specs, and then continuing that work.
Also, it's a great question, because very, very often what we do in the Sonic Labs, and I'm assuming, is these are very engineering focused activities, and for engineers a solved problem is not interested anymore. So trying to capture those lessons as when they happen, and then trying to work with the vendors, with the partner vendors, there is a very, very strong ambition to try to say if those things are genuine integration product development issues, or are there anything which are fundamentally standardization specification. So far, that activity has been slow in Sonic. We need to be very, 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 very open in that. Probably because the vendors and us have found that the specifications are great, or probably the pain is not that strong on the optional aspects or parameters of the specifications. But great question, if I take a bit of time from the panel for that. Any other question in the audience? And then Maziar, if you will allow me, I will allow one question online and then come back to you. Thank you.
Ian Ginn from in Manta.
Closer to...
oh, sorry.
For the online audience, apparently.
Sorry. Julie, you made a comment of if the ORAN's going to survive, you said, one of your comments, which is a comment in itself. I want to ask the question, do we see ORAN replacing traditional RAN over time, like in 20 years or 10 years? Has it got the capability of replacing it completely over time? Are there use cases where the old traditional approach is still the way to go? And the second part was Andy Sutton. I'm going to paraphrase it from last year because this is the first time I came across this event. It was last year, if you remember. And he was presenting about the whole how the RAN's going to work and O-RAN, different parts. And he said, you know what, Ian? And he's, by the way, Andy Sutton is distinguished engineer for BT in the RAN space. And he said, you know what, Ian, my biggest problem, my biggest headache is I've got too much choice now. How am I going to decide what components are going to be deliverable operationally? You can't run a system which is so fragmented with so many different versions. Operations can't work that way, that it's a multicolored rainbow.
It was a two-part question, future of Open RAN, and then from a perspective of the large number of components that need to be integrated and maintained over a typical 7-year life cycle of assets.
Yeah, and just let me qualify, I am not a marketing or salesperson. I am an engineer, electrical engineer, and so I'm always like, trust but verify. You always have some, you have to see. I have no idea. I can't predict what's going to survive and what's not going to survive. All I can say is what's the current state and how can how can we get it and how can we solve some certain issues that are happening. So that's maybe why I said if. Yes, we're trying to find ways to make it work, and we're trying to find ways to test it, and we're trying to stay where the state is now and how can you move it in the direction that you want to go. So I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I do know that like VHS and Beta, Beta seem like a superior technology, and I always think as an engineer that a superior technology is going to win, but VHS won, and I don't understand market forces and politics because that's not my field. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that.
Anyone else wants to attempt the crystal ball glazing?
It's a really interesting question.
Thank you, Julie.
I'm going to say actually, it's not a question of if. It may be a question of where.
Yeah.
Because as a Open RAN in itself is not enabling an operator to deploy a network, for instance. They're doing that today. Of course they are. So they don't need the technology in itself. What drives Open RAN, when you really get down to brass tacks, is that there is a need for diversification in the market. And with diversification, you get innovation as one aspect of it. So you get better products and better capability of your network. The second one, and probably perhaps the most important one, is that they want to see a reduction in cost. So they want to see more people coming into the market, driving competition, trying to drive down the cost of their networks. Because let's face it, if Open RAN is more expensive than a traditional vendor's network, the traditional vendor will typically dominate in that network. Why would you do Open RAN just for the sake of it being open? So there has to be a motivation for it. Now I said it's not if, it's where. So I believe Open RAN can meet the price point and achieve the TCO savings that the operators are looking for. That's why we're in the business. Total cost of ownership, sorry, another acronym here. Total cost of ownership. And the way it will achieve that is through diversification, but automation as well, making things simpler, doing things faster, reducing the amount of operational expenditure and capital expenditure that the operators need to do. However, there are other market sectors that it can also address, and they can also benefit from the same technology and same savings that they get as well. So I'm absolutely confident that 20 years' time, Open RAN will be a successful experiment. The question, I think, is will it be globally adopted as the dominant technology for mobile operators to deploy networks, or will it focus in a let's not use the word niche. I don't like to use the word niche, but in a defined area of market, like for instance private networks or mobile private networks. or in the indoor space as well is another area where it's difficult for people to find solutions for, and there is a definite need for innovation in the market.
Okay, Simon, very quick, because I think I have through Maziar. I think unfortunately I want to ask one question from online rather than this one. Simon, very quickly.
I was just going to very quickly say, I think the notion, of disaggregating, the network elements, providing operators with more flexibility in terms of how they architect, deploy, and scale their networks in the future is clearly something that is going to be of great benefit, and we're going to see that happen. I think also having the notion of the RIC being a native element within the architecture is something that we will see definitely happen. In terms of how the supply chain will shape up in the future, I think it's already been mentioned, that it's very difficult to forecast that. However, we're playing our part to try and help and foster and grow that sort of ecosystem and try and provide a healthy supply chain through the work that we're doing in Sonic Labs, and hopefully it gains the traction that it deserves.
Good, thank you very much. I'm wrapping up. Let's put it this way. There are quite a lot of questions. So from Maziar, sorry, and 3 online. So I will just list them. We will not have a time to answer. So one is about automation and the alignment between the labs. It was flagged several times. What are our principles of and the methodologies for testing? Another one is O-RAN-based solution be fit for private networks. I think indirectly we've answered that because of cost and ownership. And there is another one which is specific on the Sonic Labs, which is, are there any plans to coordinate, scale up, and align the Sonic Labs initiative with regulators and similar efforts in the other countries? And the short answer to that, which is the evidence from the panel, is a resolute yes. We will need to work how, which is what Katja said before. So please join me to say thank you to the panel. We could have run for longer. And thank you so very much. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dritan, and all our panelists for a very interesting discussion and definitely lots of ideas for collaboration at a global scale. So for the final part of this event, I would like to inform you about the next steps and how you can collaborate with Sony Labs. But before I do that, I would like to invite to the stage my colleague Sarah Atchison just for a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. Not much from me, but just say we hope you've really enjoyed all of the kind of speeches and amazing panel sessions that we've had today. We're really glad to say that the day's not over. And so what we'd really like to do is invite you over back to our lab after Linda wraps this up so that you can chat to some of our amazing cohort members that we have here today. So as you've seen, you've heard from quite a few of them, but we also have all the others listed on the screen who are going to be set up in the lab. So we'd really love to take the opportunity to go back and speak to them after this is over, or even just have another nose around the lab if you didn't feel like you got a good enough chance earlier today. So I'll hand back over to Linda for the next steps, but we really hope to see you all there later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so as you know, we like to keep busy here at Sony Labs, and as we are working in parallel with cohort number 2 and 3, we're about to launch the open call for cohort number 4. So this will be again a 7-month technical program for Open RAN vendors from the UK and of course international organizations. And the program will start in July and will conclude in January 2024. The open call will go live in early April, so watch this space. It's gonna come your way very soon. The technical activities will include, as usual, benchmarking, integration benchmarking, and swap experiments. And there will be an opportunity to also share learnings and best practice. In fact, what we're doing also within Sony Labs is setting up some community of practice so that the vendors can also discuss, talk about new challenges and how they can solve some problems together. And of course, throughout this program, there will be an opportunity to connect with the alumni, and the innovation practice team and technology team will be there to support you along the way. So we have 2 teams this time. The first one is looking for more mature Open RAN products focusing on the evaluation of the performance, scalability, and mobility handover in an indoor environment. And the second theme will focus on the functional testing on Open RAN outdoor equipment in the Sony Lab facility. You've heard before that we are building the outdoor field. That won't be ready, of course, in the next few months, but of course we try in the future to go take in stage to the next level. There are plenty of benefits to join. I hope you have learned some of those today. Of course, there is a great opportunity to connect with vendors, but there is also funding available for each product on each cohort, and also additional funding for the vendors that will take the role of system integrators. And of course, alongside the access to our facility, which is commercially neutral and multi-tenancy, you will also get brand exposure and the opportunity to connect with potential clients and industry leaders. And of course, we from cohort to cohort, we are also engaging with the vendors, so you'll have the opportunity to join and continue networking with the alumni of the Sony Labs program. You've heard the word ideate before, so I'm gonna tell you a little bit more about what this is. So within Sony Labs, as you know, we are building an ecosystem, and as part of this ecosystem, there is also the innovation community that can take advantage of the new virtualized intelligence features of Open RAN components. So ideate is another work stream within Sony Labs that aims to accelerate innovation in Open RAN by addressing new emerging challenges. So what we are doing is basically running some educational sessions and also experimental activities to try and develop some early stage software applications. For example, as you heard today, with the RAN intelligence controller that we strongly believe is one of the key enablers for innovation, and also a lower barrier for entry, also for those companies that we have an amazing thriving community of AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning startups and scale-ups that could potentially bring their ideas and expertise into this space. So we ran an event, quite successful workshop back in October last year, and there were some ideas that were developed, lots of them focused on energy efficiency, and we were very delighted to hear that. So we decided to run another event, and we've got 2 online educational sessions in April and 1 workshop in May. And we're inviting innovators with AI and machine learning expertise, and also, of course, researchers from academia to apply for this open call, and they will have the opportunity to experiment and test on a RIC simulator provided by Acceleran. And what they will do is basically attempt to solve a challenge that has been shared by Vodafone. And this challenge focusing on optimizing energy consumption in the RAN, of course, whilst maintaining quality of the service. So quite an exciting challenge, and we hope that the innovators will get excited and try to experiment. So the open call, we've extended until today, just in case there was someone else that would like to apply. It closes tonight at midnight. So if you're interested, you can, of course, look at our website in our open call section. But you can also scan the QR code that you can see in the screen now. And also, if you want to register your interest for any other ways of collaborating with us, we would love to hear from you. So we have come to the end of this event. I really hope that you've enjoyed it, that you made new connections. A very big thank you to all our guest speakers today. We've had some amazing conversations, lots of ideas, and of course, lots of challenges ahead. But we hope that you will join us in this journey, share your ideas and feedback on how we can improve as well. A big thank you also to the audience that have joined us online. Thank you very much. And we look forward to hear from you soon. And again, a big thank you from you all and from me and the Digital Catapult team and Ofcom. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.